PT has for the last month been the talk of the internet, and even now that the chatter has died somewhat, I've found I'm still losing sleep over it. Not just because it's scary, although it is that, but because the game gives us a lot to think about. For those who don't know and for those who like synopses, PT is essentially a marketing effort begun with a trailer shown at Sony's 2014 Gamescom briefing. The trailer contains a cinematic representation of the gameplay and the now obligatory montage of frightened green people. There's also the boast that this is the world's first interactive teaser, which isn't very true. It may have been truer to say that it was the world's first playable teaser, but they were probably worried that that would give the acronym away. After the trailer, Sony President and CEO Jim Ryan emerged onto stage with a barely contained knowing smirk and said,
PT is a new title from a new studio, and the exclusive interactive teaser is live right now on PlayStation Store. Check it out.
The announcement appeared inconsequential enough, but take note that the PT trailer immediately followed an appearance by famed Japanese developer Hideo Kojima. We now know why. PT isn't a new game at all, it's a teaser for the next game in the long-running Silent Hill franchise, and it wasn't developed by a new studio either, it's the work of Kojima Productions. As much as I appreciate PT as a clever bit of advertisement, I'm not interested in delving further into that aspect of it. Neither am I interested in speculating about the game that PT foreshadows. There have been some cool theories, such as the fact that the S at the end of Silent Hills could very easily function as a 5, marking the first numbered entry in the series since 2004's Silent Hill 4 The Room, or that the pluralized title denotes multiple dimensions, a theory supported by PT's looping hallway. But I prefer to examine PT as its own game. In this video you'll find a collection of some theories I've stolen straight from the internet, as well as a modest analysis made by myself, and running in the background is me performing a complete playthrough without getting attacked by the ghost, which you may follow if you've yet to finish the game. I do move fairly quickly and I don't stop to listen to all the audio, but I'll be including transcripts so you can pause and read if you like. So, let's begin. The first thing you might notice besides the Kama Sutra cockroaches is that opening the door is the faintly discernible outline of a figure, almost certainly the ghost, whom we'll meet later. While the camera is averted, the figure disappears. From this we can assume that wherever we're going there at the ghost's invitation. The ghost is our host. Here the player is given control, but no direction. We're not given any real instruction throughout the game, but there's a door ahead and that's instruction enough. The visuals in the hallway are very impressive. Because the entirety of the teaser takes place in the same location, the development team was perhaps able to give PT a level of attention that might not usually be afforded to the individual areas of a larger game. I would be surprised if Silent Hills looks as good as this does. Of course, I could be overselling the visuals here. In an interview I'll link in the description below, Kojima claims the graphical quality was actually reduced to disguise the fact that PT was not made by a small development team. The second hallway loop presents the player with the first obstacle. Take note that the torn photograph is seen here still hanging on the wall. When we round the corner we see that the hallway exit is closed and find ourselves unable to progress. The photograph is triggered to move just before we reach the radio. This is arguably the first demonstration of a ghostly presence, since there is no sign of what could have displaced the photo. I have a suspicion that it's not the ghost shaking the bathroom door here. I'll explain more a little later. I'll say now though that most of the quote-unquote clues in the PT are probably just moments intended to establish an atmosphere of unease. The shaking bathroom door is probably just shaking because that's a pretty scary thing for a bathroom door to do. Touching the photograph with our invisible feet is enough to open the hallway exit. You do not need to inspect it. This is an important insight into the design mentality. The developers wholly expect players to accidentally progress to the next loop without noticing that the photograph has moved, and thus without discovering the ability to zoom by clicking the right thumbstick. While it's possible to learn about the zoom functionality by experimenting a little with the controller, it's clear that PT demands the environment be paid close attention to. This has the added effect of amplifying player focus and investment, which leaves them more susceptible to scares. I'm not exactly sure what the photograph's message is supposed to signify. My guess is it's simply something meant to sound a little creepy and to pique the player's curiosity. If I had to make an interpretation, I'd say that the first two lines refer to the photograph's fragmentation, and that each fragment's message is represented in a different language, or tongue. The final line is possibly meant as encouragement, i.e. the solution to PT will always be there no matter how long it takes you to reach it. I don't think there's any real significance to the multilinguality either. Kojima has said he wanted people from all around the world to work together to solve this, and locking messages behind a language barrier was his way to do that. If I had to make an interpretation, I'd say that whatever it is in the tap water or on the radio waves that's manipulating fathers into massacring their families, it's happening on a global scale. Finding the final photo fragment in the pause menu is no doubt meant as another hint of Kojima's involvement, since he's famous for including metafictional elements in his games, such as Psycho Mantis in the first Metal Gear Solid. Ahead we'll see the hallway exit close. When entering a world with rules different to that of our own, it's worth taking note of how those rules manifest. Now we know that in PT, things can move without being physically manipulated. It's fair to assume that something supernatural is exerting influence over the hallway. The supernatural something probably isn't the ghost, and you'll see why I think so in a moment. Whoever closed the hallway exit also opened the bathroom door, but it's the ghost that shuts it in the player's face. Note that the ghost physically shuts the door, just as she physically opened it at the beginning of the teaser. It would appear that her capabilities are limited to physical interaction. At this point, the player has no idea who the ghost is, but you can see that her right eye is missing. The gouge it out puzzle later on is proof enough for me that the ghost haunting the hallway is that of the woman in the photographs. In this loop, we see the ghost in her entirety. Not only does she have the stature of a female basketballer, but looking carefully, it does appear as if her eye is still missing, which is how we know it's the same ghost who shut the bathroom door. She also has one leg stretched out, which she seems to have done to account for the single high heel she's wearing. And she has a weird neck, which inspired a crackpot theory I'll explain later. The ghost's presence here may additionally serve to tell the player that she has left the bathroom. Unfortunately, I don't think there's a good explanation for why the ghost disappears as the player approaches her. Her appearance and disappearance is probably just another way to unsettle the player without yet forcing a direct confrontation, and thus allowing for tension to build further. In the next loop, we are finally given access to the bathroom. Earlier the ghost prevented our entry, but we've since seen her outside it, and so now there's nothing stopping us. Inside is a flashlight, a genre staple, and a fetus. As soon as the player looks at the fetus, a haunting begins. We can hear the hallway exit open and footsteps approach the bathroom door. Every alternate footstep is louder than the other, as if it were made by a high heel. This is how we know for sure that we're listening to the ghost's footsteps. The ghost attempts to open the bathroom door, but she can't. This wouldn't make sense if it were the ghost who closed it on us in the first place. Instead, it was probably the supernatural force I mentioned earlier. The supernatural force keeps the door closed long after the haunting ends. In fact, here you'll see me wrestle with what is actually PT's most difficult puzzle, because it's one for which solutions cannot be found online: how to open the bathroom door. But it gives me some time to discuss who I think the supernatural force is. You may have noticed that the instant the haunting begins, the fetus starts to cry. The fetus doesn't stop crying until the haunting ends and the ghost leaves. This seems to indicate that the fetus is afraid of the ghost. That knowledge, coupled with the utter lack of other suspects, tells me that the fetus is manipulating objects around the hallway, the express intention of trying to help the protagonist learn about the murder that happened here. In the second loop, the fetus closed the hallway exit and shook the bathroom door to get the player's attention, and then threw the photograph to the ground to warn us of who's haunting the hallway. Likewise, the radio transmission, spoken with the same voice that performs the fetus's dialogue later, is another attempt at communication. The idea of a telepathic fetus may sound a little ridiculous, but the only other likely theory I can muster is that the ghost is the manifestation of the murdered wife's malignance, whereas the supernatural force is all her leftover goodness, but there's not much evidence to support that explanation. Above the bathtub you can spot a hole in the wall. Some pundits seem to believe you can see an eye or even a camera staring back at you here, but I don't think so. The ghost is outside the bathroom door, not the peephole. If you check the other side of the peephole once the bathroom door has opened, you'll see that the painting that covers the hole is still in place. Any reflection of the torch light is probably nothing more than a dodgy texture. The coast appears to be clear once the bathroom door opens, but the ghost must be lurking somewhere nearby, because emerging into the next loop we find ourselves possessed. We know this because we can hear the ghost's distorted breathing, we can see the ghost's freaky neck twitching in our shadow at the end of the hallway, and we can occasionally hear the click of the ghost's high heel. It is possible to be attacked by the ghost here, and it's even more likely to happen if we move beyond this loop without gouging out the eye. There's no need to inspect the photograph, simply pressing X will suffice. The radio is playing the same report from the very first loop, but with an added overlay. The new audio can be interpreted as messages coming from the supernatural force. Above the doorway we find another new message. It is unclear who wrote it, and the name Lisa may not necessarily refer to the ghost, as is the general assumption. In the next loop, the supernatural force draws our attention to the upper atrium. Watching us from the balcony with a very disturbing grin is the ghost. A common assumption is that this is a different ghost. It certainly looks a little different. Some people have even gone so far as to say it looks like a man. However, faintly visible is the ghost's missing eye, evidence enough for me that this is still the woman from the photographs, despite the disparity. When you look up at the ghost, however, you can hear footsteps approaching you. While this may contribute to the implication that there is more than one ghost, I think it's more likely a technique intended to keep the player from feeling secure. We may be able to see the ghost, but that does not mean we're safe. For those of you who haven't been following the speculation online, that's a lot of information to take in. For that reason, and because it's taken me a very long time to put this thing together, I've split the video into 2 parts. The next part will contain the end of the playthrough, at least one crackpot theory, and my thoughts on 7780 and 204863. Thank you very much for watching.